to J Squared. This is going to be a podcast where we're interviewing staff members on their life story. Today we're here with Mr. Naylor.
Thank you, Jordan. Now, Mr. Naylor, tell me, what inspired you to be a teacher?
It's one of those things. I think I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher, but the person that inspired me to become an English teacher was Mrs. Hayes, Vicki Hayes. Her husband was Coach Hayes, who coached here for the longest time, recently passed away, but I had her as an English teacher in 9th grade, and she was inspirational, and after that I just kind of knew.
So you always wanted to be a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there were times whenever I was little where there was a time I wanted to be a mailman for some reason. I can remember saying to my parents that I wanted to be a garbage man at one point.
My brother said the same thing.
Yeah? He wanted to be a garbage man?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like a fun job whenever you're just a little kid. And so the garbage man, mailman, but then, I guess around 6th or 7th grade, I probably just knew. And I don't know how I knew, you just had like a feeling. Like I thought it looked like a cool job. It's weird because you hear a lot of people say, they'll make jokes about teachers like, oh, you get your summers off, that's why you want it. I never thought about anything like that. I never thought like, oh, I'll get my summers off, this would be a great job. I just thought like, you just have a feeling, and yeah, so it's weird. Now, not to get like too deep, but I can remember being like, I went to St. Matthew's, a Catholic school, so we had religion classes, and we would have nuns talk to us about vocations. And so when you think of vocations now, you think of vocational school, trade school, you're learning a job. So it was different in the way they told us. They would say like, a vocation, they would tell us is like, whenever God sort of tells you what you're supposed to do. And it was like, I remember thinking like, so what, he's gonna talk to us? All I can tell you is like, when you know, you know. Like whenever you know what you're supposed to do, you just know. And it's like, how do you know what you're supposed to do? You just feel it. And that's whenever I thought like, maybe that's what they're talking about. Like, I'm not hearing somebody talk to me in words, but I know what they're saying and I'm supposed to do this. So yeah, that was how.
So where was your whole education coming up from, elementary school from?
Yeah, well, anybody in Tyrone who's from Tyrone, so I'm from Tyrone, anybody who's from Tyrone would know all the old school elementary schools. So in Tyrone there was like Adams, Lincoln, Logan, and Bald Eagle, Warriors Mark. We had all these different elementary schools. So they would know this. I went to Adams Elementary School for kindergarten. And but then after that I went to St. Matthew's School from 1st through 8th grade, which was kind of a big deal. Like at the time that school went up through 8th grade, and after 6th grade you kind of had a choice. Do you want to stay here or do you want to go to the high school for 7th grade? My parents and I chose for me to stay there, which is one of the best decisions in my life, because I joke about this. If you might remember this from class. If you don't, I wouldn't feel bad. Who would remember anything like this? But I was kind of a bad kid whenever I was in elementary school. Like I was like bad grades, disrespectful. That was probably the worst part of it, was I was disrespectful to teachers. I was kind of a jerk. And my parents were just like, you need to stay here for discipline. And I did. It was up to me, but I chose to stay. So I was there for 7th and 8th grade. And in 7th grade, I was one of 3 kids who were in my class. One of them transferred out for 8th grade. In 8th grade, I was one of only 2 kids who were in my class. But that was one of the best things for me, because I had nobody to screw off with. It was just a really, really good thing. So by the time I went to the high school, I was like straight as an arrow. Like I was definitely like kind of nerdy by the time I went. I went from being like a class clown to kind of nerdy by the time I went to high school. So I went to Tyrone Area High School, graduated from there sometime in the 90s. And then I went to Lock Haven University. So, and that was another great experience.
Where did you get your first teaching job?
So my first teaching job was at Tyrone Area High School, and I taught there for 9 years. I never wanted to teach there before that. I always thought I would go someplace else. My student teaching experience was at Lock Haven High School in Bellefonte, and those places were really cool, and it made me think like, oh, it'd be great to, I think whenever you first start thinking of teaching, you think of all the teachers that inspired you, and you're like, oh, did you just like they did? And so you want to come back to your old school, and that's where it's comfortable. But after college, I was like, I do not want to go to Tyrone. I want to go someplace else. These other schools are neat to learn about. And even though it's Lock Haven, which Lock Haven was very much like the town of Tyrone, the town of Bellwood was so similar. I guess Bellefonte would be comparable to Hollidaysburg. So it's not like you've never been to places like that before, but they were still different. So I thought I'd go someplace else. But after I got out of college, I've always written for the newspaper. I've always done newspaper writing, and I was working full-time at the Daily Herald in Tyrone. I was covering, one of my beats was education writing, and so I was covering Tyrone and Bellwood. And Dr. William Miller, who was the superintendent of Tyrone at that time, called me, said, we have a position open, would you like to apply for it? We think you'd do all right. And I did, and it was gifted education, so not English education, it was gifted education. I had no idea what it was. It is special education, technically, but it's special education for those kids who are like gifted and talented, so they have high IQs. And you've got to find different activities that would enrich their education or broaden their education, even sometimes with those kids, ways to motivate them. But to make a long story short, I had zero clue what I was doing. I just said yes, because it was like a foot in the door. And over the years, I kind of studied it, read about it, went to seminars and all these other things and found out what it was. And basically it was awesome because I got to develop my own program. Because I don't know how to put it that doesn't sound bad. They just wanted those kids doing something. They weren't making me do anything. So it was like, you do what you want to do. So I had to, it was frustrating my first couple years because there are times I definitely wanted to cry because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, no clue. But if you have pride in yourself and a little bit of drive, which I think any good teacher, whenever you're young, has drive, you just can make things happen. So that was, so that was it, Tyrone. And then by about my 7th or 8th year, they needed somebody to take over a couple English classes because someone had resigned, and that's how I got into teaching English again.
So how did you end up here then?
My wife, Tara, her first, not her first full-time job, but one of her early full-time jobs was at the elementary school in Bellwood. And you have to understand, like this, I'm sure it still is, it's just, education is different now in that there's not as many people getting into it, so there's scarcity in terms of job applicants. Back then, in the early 2000s, there wasn't scarcity, there was tons, and Bellwood was a destination spot. And if you got a job in Bellwood, you know, I just beat out like 100 people who wanted this job. And so you felt like, wow, I did something, I must be good. Tara got a job at the elementary school, and so we were engaged, and it was like, where are we gonna go? And I was getting a little bit restless in Tyrone, I don't know why. And so I was sort of applying at other places too. Again, I don't know why, because I did really, really like it down there. But she was working here, so I applied in Bellefonte. I actually had a couple like called back for second interviews and stuff like that. She ends up getting a full-time position here, so it was like, okay, so let's just stay in this area. And then it was like around the spring of 2006, she just forwarded me this email that was going around here, and it was like, English position open. She just forwarded it to me. I'm like, I sent a letter of interest, and the next thing you know, I got interviews, and I went through a bunch of round of interviews. So, to make a long story short, the second time I said this, I don't know why. I have no idea. Like, it was just something that happened, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And the next thing I know, I was caught up in the machine, where I'm like, I'm not getting out of this. Like, I actually have to go through with this. And lo and behold, I got the job, so yeah.
Now, do you have any embarrassing teaching moments that you'd like to tell us?
All right, not really. I haven't told this story in a long time, but I only have one that actually embarrassed me. Because nothing embarrasses me. Like, if anybody's ever had me in class, they would probably know this. Like, the way I am in class is kind of the way I am right now, is the way I am in real life. And like the dumb things I say to you guys in class, I probably say the exact same things to my kids. The weird things I say, or what I'd probably say them to my friends. Like, so I do think it's really important. I think that's one of the things you gotta be, if you want to do well at anything, you have to be honest. And so like, I kind of wear it on my sleeve. Like, I just am who I am. So you guys probably know most things, so nothing really embarrasses me. But one time when I was teaching at Tyrone, I assigned kids some work, and it was a class that I team taught with another teacher. I taught the first half of class in English, he taught the second half of the class as a history class. And sometimes we would combine, and it made for cool activities. So it wasn't my room, so I wasn't good with the equipment. So I give the kids an assignment, I'm like, I'm gonna sit down, you guys finish it, when you're done, bring it back up to me. And I went over to the desk, and I went to sit down, and as I did, I bumped the chair. And the thing had these wheels that were really, really loose, and the chair went moving. And once I got to about here, I was like, that thing's gonna keep on moving. And it was like, decisions had to be made. And I was like, you can either sit down really fast and catch it before it goes, or I don't know, something bad's gonna happen. I decided to try to catch it. The chair kept moving and I fell down on the floor and was like on my back, kind of like rolling there. And the whole class was dead silent. And I stood up and I was just like, you have to laugh. I'm like, guys, you're allowed to laugh. That was pretty funny. I just fell down. I'm like, you can tell all your friends after class, that was pretty funny, you can tell. So that's probably the only embarrassing thing that ever happened, I think.
All right, so we're going to take this to our next segment of Outside of School. And you're a published author, aren't you?
Yes.
What was the most difficult challenge you had to face while writing that book?
The interview process, just lining up interviews. So if anybody's ever going to write a book like I did, so like if you're a creative writer, which I'm not very creative at all, then you probably don't need to worry about that kind of stuff. But for me, the biggest challenge was lining up interviews with people. I had to. So the book I wrote was a history of both the town of Tyrone and the football program in Tyrone. And I've counted them up before. I probably did like, I don't know, 50 or 60 interviews. So you gotta be organized, you gotta be on top of things. And so that was probably the biggest challenge. But as far as writing it, it wasn't a challenge at all. It was fun. So I'm not gonna say it was easy, but it was like fun. So it wasn't like a challenge.
How long did it take you to fully go from the idea to finished product?
Oh, all right. So that idea was many, many years in the making. When I first started writing for the Herald, I had nothing to do. I had no family. And so in the evenings, I would spend time at work at the Herald offices, and I would go through files, and I found all these old sports files, and I would find all these stories, and I'm like, how does nobody know about this stuff, you know? And I would take those and make like little stories that I would put in like the newspaper, like the football tab and places like that, like little fun historical stories. And one day, in the early, this is probably about 2017 or 18, I was at a youth football game and somebody was talking to me about one of these cool stories I did. And they're like, you should put all that stuff together in a book. I'm like, who would read this book that you're talking about? Like, nobody wants to read a book about Tyrone football. Oh no, I think people would. But I kind of kept that in the back of my mind. But I always had all of these stories that I could use. And then one day in 2020, it was March 13th, they made an announcement that we were gonna end school for 2 weeks. And so nothing for 2 weeks. You didn't have to go online, you didn't have to do anything. And so I was kind of like, that very night, I'm sitting there and I'm like, what can I do with 2 weeks with nothing to do? And I'm like, I'm gonna write that book, they said. I think I can have this done in 2 weeks. And so the first thing I did was I took all those stories I had saved and I kind of put them together chronologically in a Word document. But it turns out there were only like 7 or 8 chapters. and I'm like, okay, here we go, I'm gonna start. And so I started researching that night, and it took me until, so that was 2020, and it was published in November of 2021. So it took me about 2 years, and it was every single night. Like it was like a relationship. It was like having, like you spent time with it every single day, but it was great. And so it took me about 2 years, but it was also something that was always in the making somewhere, so.
And then what really inspired you to write? Was it just like a natural thing, kind of like teaching? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Like I was always good at writing in high school. I don't know why. And I took extra classes, so I would take like whenever I was in high school, you had your English class, but they also had these electives that you could do, and there were electives that were out of this world. And one of them was creative writing. I had creative writing 1, creative writing 2. I took all those classes. When I got into college, I would take writing classes, and I don't know. I mean, I see it in my students now, and I think it's very similar to like, there's people that you know that they've never played a sport before and they can pick it up and they're good at it all of a sudden. Like I've seen people that like they've never played it before and they can all of a sudden they're playing like foosball or pool and they're really good. And they're like, how are they beating me? Like I play this all the time. And it's just like they have natural talents of little things like that. I've seen kids that just understand math problems and I don't know why. For some reason I could always do writing and I see it in some of my kids now where they, for whatever reason, like they never have grammar problems. They never write in incomplete sentences. And some people, it just clicks with them, and it just clicked with me. And then whenever I was like 19, I just, I saw an advertisement for a newspaper writing sports job. And I'm like, oh, I think I could do that. And I just started doing it. And then I would read. I would read the way other people wrote their sports stories. I would read Sports Illustrated. I would read the Altoona Mirror. I would just see how other people did it and take little parts of it and use that in my own stuff. So.
Now, do you have any other hobbies outside of the classroom?
No, not really. I mean, I lift weights. So sports and fitness is fun for me. I coach constantly, so I coach all the time. Basketball, I coach softball, and so I have one private, this is my thing, and it's professional wrestling for whatever reason, and I don't care what anybody thinks about that. I'll say it. And so 3 times a week, that's the only television I watch besides sports. I'll watch the Steelers play, I'll try to watch the Penguins play and things like that, but the only television I watch besides sports is I'll watch AEW wrestling on Wednesday nights. It's on Friday nights, it's on Saturday nights. And anytime they're in town, I've seen them, they've been in State College once, I saw that. They've been in Pittsburgh 5 times since the company opened in 2019, maybe 6. And so I've been to all of those shows too, so I don't know, I like it, so.
All right, this is kind of a little bit of a wild one, but do you know what the longest you've gone without sleep is? And why?
The longest I've gone without sleep. I don't sleep much, I don't know. That might be a fun fact that people don't know. So every night I go to bed, probably last night I stopped doing, so I have my little space in my downstairs where I write sports stories, and I should give you guys a picture of this. It would make a good picture. It's the walls are adorned with all of my dolls and sports figures, and it's the most confusing room for children because whenever my kids have friends over, it's hey, you can go into the room with all the toys. You may not touch any one of them. But it's all these sports figurines and stuff. There's an air hockey table there, and I have a whole big shelf that's got all my wrestling dolls on it, and all the professional wrestling belts that I've collected over the years. And so I work there every single night, and last night I left at 1:15. And then I get into my bed and I watch 15 minutes of maybe basketball or something like that. So about 1:30 to 2, I go to bed every night, wake up sometime around 6. I think my alarm's always set for 6:05. I never actually get to bed at 6:05. It's usually 6:20 something, 6:30 something. But, so I don't sleep that much anyway, but let me think, how long is that? I don't know, 24 hours, I don't know, probably prom night in high school or something like that. You stay up all night and then, yeah.
Now, if you were trapped on a deserted island, what books or movies would you bring?
Let me think. A movie I would bring. I'd bring the Star Wars trilogy, and then a book that I would take. There's so many good ones. Maybe The Hunger Games or something. I really like that one. I could read that more than once.
All right, so we're gonna go to our last segment. That's just gonna involve quick questions and just simple answers.
All right.
So, do you believe that aliens exist?
Yes. Look, there's no doubt that aliens exist. David Grush, read it. They're admitting to it right now. Aliens do exist. Everybody's laughing, but it's true. Do you know who David Grush is? He's given testimony before the Senate. There are aliens. There are non-human biologics that have visited the planet, and that the government has retained stuff from their crash sites. He's testified to this in front of Congress. He was on Joe Rogan 2 weeks ago. But even before that, yes, I thought. He just confirmed it. So, yeah, there are.
If you could eat only one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Eggs. For sure. I eat 6 eggs every single day. So you guys want fun facts? There you go. We're digging into it now. Because I don't eat until 3 to 4 o'clock every day, so I don't eat at school. And when I get home, I won't have any carbohydrates until my final meal of the day. I eat twice a day. My first meal is always 6 eggs.
All right, so this will be the last question. We're gonna go with, what would you sing at a karaoke night?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd sing. I'd maybe see if they had any rap music, and I'd probably do The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5.
All right. We're going to end the podcast here. Thank you for taking your time and watching. This has been Mr. Naylor. Thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you, Mr.
All right. It's great to be here for the first episode.
J Squared out.